Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in from across the continent for another very exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. If you're new to us, and quite a few of you are today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And you're catching us in a very exciting day. It may be Monday, but today is part 2 of our epic series in conjunction with the amazing folks at Project Learning Tree Canada. I really encourage you, check out their website. No one does a better job of doing forest education than them, and we're so thrilled to have a 5-part epic series on all manner of cool things related to trees, forests, and beyond this week. So do check that out. Register for the rest. There's lots to explore and discover. Now, before I dive in with our topic du jour, our most popular program of the entire series, I want to note we do have a Kahoot today. So between our talk and our Q&A, if you want to play along with a little 4-question quiz, you can pull up that game pin below and do just that to test your understanding and have a little bit of fun at about the 25-minute mark. But without further ado, Meg Hanna is joining us, and today she is going to talk to us about growing a forest in a city. I grew up in Toronto. Almost 3 million people are there, and its literal tagline is a city within a park, because everywhere you go, there are trees galore. So I'm so excited to learn a little bit about her amazing work, how we can foster forest growth in our own cities, and all sorts of things that we can do as classrooms. So I'm going to zip it. Meg, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to the broadcast.
Hello, bonjour, hi, hola. So great to see you today.
So great to see you too. And I know you got a lot to share with your very thematic background too. We got the green wall, the plants. It looks great. You're very on point. But I'm going to disappear and let you dive in with your presentation, because there's a lot of cool stuff you want to bring to us today. So take us away, Meg.
All right. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. And thank you for your interest in the forest. Today, I'm inviting you to explore growing a forest in a city. So cities can be very gray, paved, dusty environments with a lot of buildings, streets, and vehicles. And sometimes there aren't too many plants. Or when they are, sometimes they have a bit of trouble getting up and thriving. So how do we go from that tree or that flower that's just struggling to grow out of a crack of pavement? And how do we go to this image of a lush, vibrant forest teeming with life where it's a good place to be? So today, what I'm proposing is that we take a moment to connect with trees and look at them and think of them in a different way, that we understand how they grow and what it takes for them to thrive. And they can't do it on their own in the cities. It takes a community to do that. And lastly, to show you how you can explore your environment and what you can do to get involved. So let's climb into the canopy. I'd like to activate the senses a little bit. So where do you see trees? This could be a tree that maybe you appreciate in your schoolyard, something that's close to home, or maybe a tree that's close to a place or a person that you care a lot about. So I'm eager to hear about those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. Maybe you're not thinking about trees because you've got other things going on, and that's okay too. But what I would invite to you is, are there trees that are overlooked? Or maybe you do have a tree close to you that's hiding in plain sight that you can explore a little more. We have trees all around us from coast to coast to coast. In our Canadian cities, we have an example on the left with these pink flowers, this beautiful crabapple tree on a schoolyard, or towards the middle, this yellow tree that kind of fades into the background on a busy street in Quebec City that we only really notice around autumn when the leaves become this blazing yellow. Or we can even find trees on rooftops in our city. For example, the art gallery in Winnipeg, the Kumayuk, actually has poplar trees, these beautiful green trees growing on the roof. And lastly, sometimes trees can be a focal point or super picturesque. And we have this fabulous ash tree just on the bank of the Okanagan Lake in Penticton, BC. They're all around us. If we activate the senses a little further, around this time of year, it's really difficult to listen into the rustling of the leaves because a lot of our trees have not leafed out yet. And we can expect that in the next couple of weeks. But in the meantime, to get your ears going, I'd like to share a new word with you. Have you ever heard the word susurrus or susurrus? So susurrus, fun word, is actually the noise that leaves make rustling. There's a word for that in English. So the next time you're outside, I invite you to think about what you can hear in trees, whether it's the susurrus or leaves rustling, or perhaps maybe even squirrels scurrying up and down the trunk, or birds chirping away in the branches. So now that we've connected a little bit, I'd like to introduce you to my world. So my world in the trees began when I was very young. This year, I celebrate 20 years working with trees and plants. Yeah, I'm pretty old. My journey moved from the forest to the trees. So when I started going to school in high school and then cégep or college, and then moving on to university, I thought that I'd work for the government and maybe become a lawyer and commit a life to public service and serving communities. Little did I know that I would do that, but not how I imagined. It was actually my summer job as a landscaper, gardening and caring for parks, green spaces, and backyard gardens that got me really excited about plant life and sent me on a career that took me to all sorts of different places across Canada, the US, and even Aotearoa, New Zealand. So I grew up here where I'm joining you today in Montreal, Jojagi, or Montreal, depending on whether you speak French, Kanien'keha, or English. So the largest city in Quebec, and also lots of beautiful green spaces that many folks contribute to caring to. I'm also an ISA certified arborist, and that means a voluntary association of people who get together and learn about trees and stay up to date in the latest tree science, technology, and ways to collaborate. So my green jobs journey looks like a bit of a crazy hodgepodge of a board game. And this could be a fun activity to try out, is actually drawing or creating your own board game of your life, where you've been, where you're going, and where you hope to go. And my journey is a little bit full circle because I got into caring for plants and trees because people shared their knowledge and taught me and coached me and mentored me. And I'm having a bit of a full circle moment working with Sustainable Forestry Initiative and Project Learning Tree Canada because I get to share this knowledge with you and participate in teaching and mentorship. So a couple highlights here. I've worked in some really interesting places. I've planted parks and green spaces in the garden city of town of Mount Royal and cared for roses. I've managed an association of arborists and urban foresters as president for the International Society of Arboriculture Quebec chapter. I've worked on standards with the Bureau de Normalisation du Québec. So I actually got together with a group and we developed rules and ways that we could properly care for green spaces. And my cat sat with me and helped me along the way while I typed up those standards. I worked for the Montreal Botanical Garden and cared for the people who take care of bonsai trees and cultural gardens and butterfly gardens. And now my current journey has taken me to Sustainable Forestry Initiative, which I'll get to in a moment. A couple of highlights. What does that look like in real life? So on the left, kind of my awkward years, starting in parks and green spaces, caring for a rose garden, sipping coffee from styrofoam cups, which I now have my reusable cup. I have designed arboreta, so actual living museums of trees that anybody can go and visit and learn about different species of trees. I actually drew up a design, and this arboretum in St. Leonard in La Douversière Park has been around for 12 years now. I've gotten to plant trees with my colleagues at the City of Montreal, and we have some really good friends, community groups, and even city councillors join us on making our community even greener and healthier. I've been able to go into the field and teach about different things like fungi and associations with trees, as we see in the photo below as I'm looking at decay fungi that breaks down wood. And I've even encountered some really fun animals while exploring in the forest and assessing the health of trees. This chickadee actually landed on my hand, and no, I was not feeding wild animals, but the Montreal Botanical Garden has some very cheeky chickadees that will even try to land on you. So really cool place. My role at SFI is we're actually co-pilots with Project Learning Tree. SFI, the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, and Project Learning Tree work together. So I develop standards and best practices and rules to care for our plants and our green spaces. And I do this with other experts and actually share the knowledge of how they're doing excellent work across the country. So we share those learnings with each other. And then with Project Learning Tree, we support young people in forestry and conservation. We do fun activities outside so we can learn how to identify, understand, and care for trees. And then as these folks become older and want to maybe make money while doing all these wonderful discoveries and caring for trees, they can actually make a career. And in the bottom photo, we can actually go into the forest assess its health, and find ways to take care of it better. Together, we grow healthier communities. So again, if we're looking at our connection to trees, why are trees important in our cities? We're connected to them in an array of different ways, whether it's social and cultural, for our environment, for our economic well-being and livelihood, making a living, and for our connection, whether we want to be artistic and creative. There's a wide variety of ways that we're connected to trees and how they benefit humans in cities. So I'm going to get you to maybe think, and in your classrooms, you can shout out some ways that we benefit from trees. I'm sure you can think of at least one. And maybe you've thought about some of these examples here of how we're connected to trees. Trees in cities provide us with the fresh air that we need to breathe and survive. Trees, through the way that they feed themselves, they absorb the sunlight's energy and carbon dioxide from the air, and in their leaves, they transform that to energy to feed themselves, and they actually release oxygen in the air for us to breathe. They capture dust and particles and other things that then don't get into our lungs as we breathe. So they really promote fresh air for us, and they're vital in this process. Trees provide clean water. So on a really rainy day, when there's a heavy rainstorm in a city, a lot of that extra water runs off the street and into the sewer. And if there's too much rain and it's coming down too fast and too abundantly all at once, those sewers can back up with water that's not very clean. By having trees and green spaces, they help absorb the water so it gets into the ground and nourishes our trees slowly, and also that there's less water going into the sewer and overflowing it. So it promotes trees promote clean water in our cities. And the forests that are just outside of our cities actually contribute to our watershed as well. In Canada, much of our drinking water that we use in cities actually comes from forests. Trees promote biodiversity and connect us to other species. Now, biodiversity means having different species all at once in one place. This can mean butterflies and wasps and bees that pollinate the fruit and vegetables that we need to feed ourselves. And it can mean also serving as a habitat for insects, other insects, birds, and even mammals like squirrels and raccoons, and even porcupines in more forested areas. And how do trees make us feel? They can make us feel a number of things, whether it's really active and healthy or comfortable. Trees cool the air and they provide shade, which can get us feeling pretty comfortable on a hot day in the summer when it's over 30 degrees. Trees can make us feel like we want to get outside and active. If you're thinking about gym class or going for a hike or playing in your park or having a picnic, having trees around get us feeling more active and social. And trees promote our health. They help us feel better. Our heart rate and respiration actually go down when we're walking through the forest. And if we're ever not feeling well, and unfortunately, we have to find ourselves in a hospital, when we're surrounded by trees, we can actually recover and feel better even quicker. Trees are important for making our spaces welcoming, attractive, and just pretty cool places to be, whether it's from these magnolia, bright pink flowers that should be bursting out in a couple of weeks from now across southern Canada, or sometimes we like to gather around trees in parks and learn about them, as these folks are doing here in Atlanta, Georgia. And trees can make cities gorgeous, whether it's at the bottom left in Wellington, New Zealand, where we're in the mountains and filled with greenery, or on the right side in my hometown of Montreal, looking out onto the mountains. That green really makes those places just really a great place to belong and be. But a city can be a tough place for a tree for one of two main reasons. First of all, cities are artificial environments, and they don't always provide what we need for each individual tree. So I'll get to what a tree needs in a moment. The other thing is you'll notice in these photographs that these trees are pretty solitary. They're all alone, and in some of these areas, the tree that you see in the foreground is the only tree in the area. So they're disconnected from nature and the rest of the forest and ecosystems that they need to partner with and survive. And if we look at these trees here in pots, normally this is not a place where a tree can thrive for a very long time, as they need space for their root system. So these are areas where we're going to have trouble keeping trees on the landscape for a very long time. So there are things that we can do. We can improve our urban environments to support tree growth and development, so have better places to grow the trees that we have. And there's an opportunity to redesign or reconfigure our urban space to provide more room for nature. So what do we need for nature to thrive? Specifically for trees, trees need 6 main elements, and they need our understanding as well. So we can contribute to designing these better spaces, these green spaces for tree growth, and that we can give them what they need. And we can also avoid doing things like breaking their branches, tearing off their bark, or digging them up. These are all things that we can avoid doing to leave them be and let them thrive. So one fun fact about trees is, I know I was thinking about this a lot when I started. I thought the root system, underground, the things that we can't see, I actually thought that they were a mirror image of the branches, leaves, and the canopy of the tree that we see above ground, when in fact, this is not the case. Tree roots, while they do branch out like tree branches, they actually don't grow in the same way that the canopy grows. Roots spread out far and wide, and the root tips of the root system can actually extend even wider and further out than the branches in the canopy. And tree roots stay relatively close to the surface of the soil. So within the first 3 feet or 1 meter or so, that's where we're going to find most of our tree roots, and not necessarily 50, 100 feet down as we see the canopies being really large. So what do trees need? Well, I've kind of mentioned before, they need sunlight, and the energy from the sun with carbon dioxide reaching the leaves is going to be what the tree uses in its leaves or its food factory to convert it into energy to support the tree growing bigger and stronger every day. In addition to sunlight and carbon dioxide in the air, trees also need water. Water will reach their leaves and, more importantly, reach their root system. So they help those roots transport all of these elements and nutrients throughout the tree in its vascular system or its circulatory system, kind of like ours. In the soil, trees need nutrients and different types of minerals, and they need a good soil pH to be able to keep growing and thriving. And I said that they take in carbon dioxide through their leaves, but they actually take in the oxygen that we breathe, the same element they need in the soil. They need a lighter, fluffier soil with air and water in it, so the roots can also grow. Trees need room to grow. So those pots that I showed you before, and those trees that were kind of popping out of them and branches dying, trees need more room than that. They need room in the soil for the roots to extend and grow, and obviously room above ground for the canopy to thrive. And this is where people can make a difference. So there are tons of jobs out there that incorporate bringing trees to urban environments and making sure that they stay on the landscape healthy for a long period of time. Urban forestry is a discipline. It's a type of work that we can do. It's something that we can study in school, and it's something that we can even read about in all sorts of books. And there's actually even a French movie called Forêt urbaine that just came out. So we can watch movies about urban forestry. What is it? It's the planning for, the planting, caring for, and managing trees and green spaces close to people where they live, work, and play. Having trees close to homes, having trees along the road, and having parks and green spaces where folks can access and feel good. And urban forestry involves everyone, diverse groups of people. You may have forestry professionals like professional foresters, forest technologists, or forest technicians. You'll have arborists out there caring for individual trees and small groups of trees. You'll even have researchers and scientists doing tree science and using experiments to understand nature better and how we can protect and care for it. There are different partner professions that contribute to the urban forest. So landscape architects, engineers, and urban planners all play a role in designing spaces that can accommodate trees. Rights holders and landowners, so folks that have a connection to the land and have a right to be there and benefit from the land, also have a connection to trees, as they're going to be deciding what happens to that land and those trees. Students are a crucial part of the urban forest. As people learn about trees and forests, they're going to be our next folks that will care for trees in the landscape, learn about them, and maybe even work in this profession. So urban forestry is all about planning and management. If you like being outside, but you also like going into the office and planning and writing strategies, working with different laws and figuring out rules to best accomplish things, urban forestry might be a really great fit. Urban foresters plan and manage the forest from a high level, and they think about the forest as a large group or a population. So they'll work with individual trees, but they'll work with all sorts of populations of trees. They're going to use forest inventories on their computer or on their phone out in the field. And even my friends Sophie and Cecil here on the left, Sophie is actually a drone pilot and an urban forester. So she uses technology to investigate what's going on in the forest in a really high level. And then folks like the city of Burlington actually develop an urban forest strategy and planning for the future. If you like to get more out in the field and use your hands and use tools and really investigate individual trees and care for them, there's the field of arboriculture, which is the science, the practice, and purpose of tree care. Arborists tend to the environmental needs of the trees, working from the soil all the way up to the canopy. And those 6 elements that I told you earlier about and that understanding, arborists are a key point in making sure that all of that is fulfilled. There are going to be folks that are planning, pruning, or removing branches from trees, and eventually removing trees that are sick and dead and dying and are no longer safe when at proximity to people and buildings. They're going to be managing that. They use a lot of equipment and they need to work safely. So some of them may be climbing up in the tree using ropes, like my friend Mandy at the center here. Mandy teaches kids and all sorts of people how to climb trees, and she manages an association of arborists. You may have folks like Guillaume in the bottom around the tree trunk there. He's actually injecting an elm tree with medicine to protect it from Dutch elm disease. And just above Guillaume, you have a group of arborists actually all pulling a rope together to move a very large piece of wood, a large trunk. So arborists work in teams. You have to love teamwork to thrive in this environment. And you have to be able to keep your cool in situations like storms. Arborists will make communities safe after branches have broken from storms. Or even this is a more sad but kind of an interesting job as well on the left. We have a tree with all the bark coming off. It's actually been attacked by emerald ash borer, and this ash tree has unfortunately died. And just the photo next to it this is removing those dead trees with a crane to prevent those branches falling from damaging rare plants in a botanic garden. So that was a work site that I contributed to planning to, and very exciting in my career. So making decisions about trees. Urban foresters and arborists work together to make decisions about trees and provide recommendations and advice to people with tree care needs. So the urban foresters look at that population level, and arborists work with individual trees. Sometimes it's more hands-on in the field doing the work, like these folks, these arborists here teaching a community and young kids how to plant trees. Sometimes it can be in more advanced work, like my friend Frank on the left with his computer there. He's actually using sensors placed around the tree to detect how much decay or how much the tree has rotten through, and if there's enough tree response growth and if the tree is staying strong enough to stay upright. So in this case, we were able to investigate that this tree is actually doing well and can stay on the landscape. And then on the bottom here, I've measured and assessed many trees for health to see how they're doing, how big they are, and how we can design intelligently around those trees. People can work together to keep trees on the landscape for a long time. And that is our intention with urban forestry and arboriculture. You may notice folks like Jesse, who grew up in Toronto, or myself in Montreal, we don't have a lot of big old trees in our cities. In some backyards, some parks or botanic gardens, we still have some big trees left, but we do have a challenge in holding on to the trees that we have. So a great example here is in the city of Toronto. There is a historic red oak at 76 Coral Gable Drive. So this is a tree that's been on the landscape for probably 250 years, if not more. And this tree was actually in danger of being cut down as this house was sold. And there were discussions about this house being torn down and converted to apartment buildings. And that would be very damaging for the tree. And there wouldn't be any place for this tree. So arborists, urban foresters, groups, and members of the community actually got together to save and protect this tree. So this land is now going to be managed by the City of Toronto. And if you go to toronto.ca/Red Oak, you can learn about this project that is getting underway to protect this tree and turn this area into a park. So that's one, very specific way with a lot of impact that we can protect some of these bigger, older trees on our landscape. But there's another thing that we can do. We can work with the spaces that we have and design them and manage them in a way that we can plant new trees, and we can make sure that those trees become just as big and just as loved and treasured as this historic oak. So we can act together to grow healthy trees that will thrive for future generations. Just 2 slides left to go. So what you can do, if you're interested in getting outside and discovering trees a little bit more, you can learn about trees in your courses, in books, and in different activities. There are a lot of folks out there that would be really excited to take you out and look at trees. So getting outside is really important to connect with those trees. You may want to start a tree-themed project at your school. This could be a science or ecology project, looking at tree identification, or maybe try growing a tree from seed into a sapling and see what happens. Or if you're a little more artsy and creative, this could go to writing a short story or poetry about a tree, or even producing a wonderful tree painting or drawing. Once you know a little bit more, maybe you can help tend trees near you. So actually watering the trees on the landscape next to your school or your home, or maybe even participating in a tree planting project in your community. And once you have all of this knowledge and experience and connection with trees, it's really easy to get others excited about trees. So it's something that I invite you to do. If you want to explore different activities about exploring and learning and having fun in the forest, Project Learning Tree Canada actually has a whole guide about this called Explore Your Environment. And here's an activity that I've taken from that from that booklet and adapted. And I'd be happy to make this presentation available to Jesse and all the folks tuning in. You can actually go out in your schoolyard and prepare your own tree planting checklist and investigate some of those elements that I shared with you earlier. So if you're looking at a spot in your schoolyard, can you find an area that gets 6 hours of sunlight a day? Is the soil moist and light and fluffy with a lot of oxygen? Is there an area without pavement that you could actually go and plant a tree? And can you measure that area to see if there would be enough room for the tree's roots and canopy to grow? So just some things that you can explore and maybe take on yourself. So that's what I have to share with you today about urban forestry and arboriculture. I hope to see you in the forest someday, and the urban forest counts too. Thanks so much.
I'm heading right to my local forest. I'm going to go walk my stream trail with waterfalls galore when I'm done this broadcast. But I have started by sharing that amazing K8 activity guide in both the YouTube and StreamYard chat, so everyone can take a look at that when they're done this broadcast. We'll also email to all our registered classes. But before we dive in with Q&A, and we've already got questions pouring in, we're going to do our Kahoot together, test some understanding, have some fun, see who is paying attention for bragging rights. And what you win for this is Meg and I's everlasting respect. So no pressure at all. But we're going to dive in with this and get underway. If you're new to Kahoot, the faster you answer, the more points you get. So there's already 22 of you in. We're going to let you guys take a couple more seconds to get in. YouTubers, please feel free to share questions. Mr. Hancock, we're coming to you for our live class representation as well when we dive in with Q&A. But Meg, if you want to help us out with any of these answers, give us a little hints along the way. You're welcome to. We got about 20 seconds per question. So let's get to it in our Kahoot together. All right. Drum roll, please. Here we go. I love forests and cities, not just Toronto. I'm in Corner Brook, Newfoundland now, so we're basically all wilderness in every direction around me, and it's one of the great joys in life. So, first question, and this speaks to the sort of ubiquity of trees. Have you seen a tree today? There is a right answer to this question. If your answer is no, we're going to talk about where you happen to be joining from today. But pretty much, if you get up anywhere on this planet other than the midst of deserts or Antarctica, you are going to see trees. And if you're in a city like Toronto, like Montreal, that really emphasizes that, there's trees galore. But 2 of you did not see a tree. So you'll have to let me know where you're tuning in from. I want to know at the end of the broadcast. You're just trolling us. But Bright Yeti has our lead.
I love that.
Way to go. All right. This one's a bit more of a serious one. Why are trees important in cities? We covered some of these. We had a great slide on this. Is it comfort? Trees provide shade. Health? Trees make us feel better. Biodiversity? Trees provide homes for other species. Or hint, hint, nudge, nudge. All of the above. You know, Meg, one of our favorite things we featured was a whole thing on what's it called? Park RX or Park RX? Yeah.
Yeah, prescription. Yeah.
Yes, Park prescription. Thank you. There's the name. So the idea that if you're in a hospital and your window looks out on a parking lot, you will get better slower than someone whose window looks out on a forest, which is crazy. Like, we know this through robust statistics over years ago. So our audience killed it in this one. Way to go, everyone. All the above is correct. Eager piranha is eager indeed, and now has our lead. Okay, question 3. What do trees need? We talked about this as well. And some of Meg's misconceptions of trees as well, maybe about the root system. But are some of these options jumping out to you? Is it all of the above again, as in perhaps every Kahoot question that I ever feature this question in? There's lots of good options here. Perhaps all 3. Let's see, 24 answers in. Great questions in the chat too, guys. You guys rock. Yes, all of the above again. You guys are killing it. Way to go. Eager Piranha has our lead. With one more question to go. Final one. True or false? Some cities protect big and old trees. No, we just cut them all down. What do we think? Maybe the answer's in the picture as well. But I love this. I've got to say, grown man, professional detachment aside, like, it's so amazing that a city like where I grew up is like, wow, that tree is really special. People love that tree. We've got to protect it and build a barrier around it. Make sure we're not cutting it down to put a home or anything else. Like, really, really amazing that exists on this planet. And I'm really happy to have grown up in a place like that. So thanks for sharing, Meg. All right. I'm using alpacas third. We're heading to our YouTubers for a question to begin. And then Mr. Hancock, we're coming to you too. Polite Seal second. And first, for all the marbles, is it Eager Piranha? Did you almost go wire to wire? You basically did. Way to go. If you are any of these folks, let us know who you are in the chat. And Meg, to kick off, a great question from Gerline in Miss Shields' class. They're in the Peel Virtual Elementary School. Can trees alter the climate of the area they grow in?
That's got a lot of nuance to it. So there's a 2-part to this question. So if you have an individual tree in an area, they can actually provide a microclimate. So the leaves and the shade can actually make a very small microclimate in an area like a garden or a backyard. You can actually notice a difference. And in some cities, it can be as much as 8 degrees Celsius cooler under a tree than over the pavement. Collectively, trees together in a forest, that's a whole other kettle of fish. And there's a lot of research coming out now on how forests interact with the atmosphere and make sure that the water cycle and, it's raining when it's supposed to. So that's a field that you're really going to want to keep an eye on, and you could really go far in your knowledge with it.
Yeah. But as you said, and as we had in the Coot, trees rock. Like, trees are pretty much a universal good. Wherever they go, the more trees, the better. So way to go, guys. Yeah. Mr. Hancock's class, we're going to head to Georgetown Live. Come on in and take us away with a question on camera. Hey.
Speaking of being universally good, one of our students was wondering, how do you tell an invasive tree from a tree that should be there?
Another one with a lot of nuance. So tree identification is going to be your bud. Now, you want to really make sure that you can identify the tree by the leaves, by the buds, by subtle details along the branches, like the bud scales, because sometimes we have a genus of tree, right? So you could have maple, which is a genus of tree, and you can have native species of maple, and you can actually have maple that are coming from a different environment. And I will say that you want to, botanists are your friends, understanding what invasive species lists are. You might want to work with the CFIA or the Canadian Food Inspection Agency that identifies what some of those species that are aggressive and not very good for the environment are. But there's another thing to unpack as well. Cities are artificial environments that have been built, and some native trees have difficulty in growing in very specific areas. This is why urban foresters and arborists are your friends, because they can determine with tree ID and knowledge which ornamental or exotic species might be a good fit, which native species are going to thrive, and which invasive species are really not going to help the environment out, and that we should think about not planting or planting less of.
Yeah, this leads us so nicely to our next question, but I want to harp on this for just a quick second. So I grew up by the Humber River in Toronto on the West End, and I go walking, and one day there was this whole section of forest that they cut down, and I was shocked. This amazing place, and they had a whole big sign, and they said, look, this whole forest was all invasive species that were expanding and taking over the area, and we wanted to cut them down to replant a forest of native trees. And oh, how cool is that? So the context is everything on that, and I'm really glad we got that question. Thanks, Mr. Hancock. All right, so speaking of planting trees, Miss Riddle's group, they want to know, do you need to ask the city before you plant a tree?
So the first thing before you plant a tree is you need to have an understanding of where are you planting that tree. Are you the owner of that land, and do you have the right to modify and change the land? Or does that land belong to somebody else? In the case of in front of your home, there may be a portion of your yard that belongs to you and you can do all sorts of great things with it. Or there might be a band of land between the street, the sidewalk, and the home that belongs to the city. The best thing to do before dig is ask who that land belongs to, and if it does belong to somebody else like a city, reach out to them and figure out what their guidelines are and how you can collaborate with them. Some cities even offer to plant a tree free of charge in different areas, so it's really good to call and inform before you get those shovels out.
Yep. But I love that you're keen to plant trees. And so the government of Canada, too, over the last few years, I don't know if it's a full decade, but like we have a huge initiative nationwide to plant trees. Some of my best friends have spent summers planting trees out in British Columbia. That's a bit of a different thing, but there's lots of efforts. If you want to get involved in putting a spade in the ground, you can absolutely get out there and do that. And I hope you do. All right. Another question full of nuance, Meg. Are there specific tree species that best suit the nature and environment of Canada?
Yes, I mean, in different areas of Canada, depending on where we are, whether we're in the St. Lawrence lowlands or the Canadian Shield, there are different trees that are adapted to specific climate of Canada, whether it's a very wet site or whether it's very dry or very cold. Usually when we select a tree, we want to observe and look at what's natively growing there, but we also need to take into account the climate or the hardiness zone, and that's calculated on how cold an environment gets, and that's going to be one of our basic limiting factors when we decide which tree to plant where.
Yeah, we're such a huge country too. I mean, Canada, I'm literally closer to Morocco, and I could cross the Atlantic Ocean faster than I could go to Vancouver in British Columbia. And so I hope our Canadian friends, wherever you're tuning in from today, if you get the chance to go to like BC and Alberta's forest, you've got like 250-foot tall monster trees because the climate there really suits them. It's one of the most special things you can witness, not just in this country, but on planet Earth. So it's a little bit different everywhere, and I'm really glad we got that message. And thanks, Meg. All right. Mr. Hancock, we're coming back to you for another live one, and we'll take a couple more from our YouTube friends. Georgetown, hey.
Speaking of tall trees, one of my students wanted to know what is the tallest tree, and maybe can you explain why that one grows so tall?
Yeah, that is a good one. So I don't have a photo specifically of that tree, but if you just give me a moment, I can actually show you the species of tree that produces the largest specimens on Earth. So let's have a look at that. Boom.
You pull it up, and I'll pull out their acorn because I have an acorn from that same tree. So it's like one of my prized possessions, which is very fun.
Twins.
Yes. There we go. Acorn buddies. Tell us more.
So this species of tree is the coastal redwood. So it's native to the coastal areas of California. The largest or the tallest tree that we know in the world right now is called Hyperion. It's over, I think, 116 meters tall. And just for reference, that's taller than the Big Ben clock tower in London, England. So that is a very tall tree. And scientists are exploring forested environments every day. I would be inclined to think that maybe we might find a bigger tree someday, as long as we protect and hold on to our forests. So, yeah, sequoia. That has one of the largest tree on Earth.
Yeah. I love that we get these superlatives in because they're such special places. Now, a lot of places with redwoods and sequoias are protected areas. We set them aside as national parks, certainly in the United States where a lot of them live. But then you get into the really old trees like bristlecone pines, also in California. The grove with the oldest trees in the world, we don't tell people where that is. Like scientists know, but I couldn't just go and see the oldest tree and touch it because they want to really, really protect it from people that might want to damage it in some way. And I find that really fascinating, sort of a mixed approach. Thanks, Mr. Hancock, for the great question. All right, YouTube, we're going to take a few more questions. Meg, you're a really fast question and answer. So this has been we're whipping through these. All right, Ms. Riddle's class wants to know, do large plants create as much health and climate benefits as trees, thinking of things like a large rhododendron or something, or trees really have something special going for them?
Again, that's a lot of context. So depending on the benefit and what we're looking for example, if we're looking at a tree and we want to provide as much oxygen as possible, or we want to capture as much rainwater as possible, then a well-suited adapted tree that's very large is going to bring us more benefits, which is the argument of why we want to keep old and mature, healthy trees in our city. However, rhododendron has its value as well. If we're looking for cultural significance and connecting with trees and healing faster and just feeling really great overall about the environment, sometimes a shrub or a smaller tree or something with a lot of personal significance can be just as valuable from one person to the next.
What a beautiful answer. Thanks so much for that, Meg. All right, let's take another one from YouTube and then we'll head back to Mr. Hancock to wrap up. What are the biggest threats to trees in Canada? What's coming down the pipeline that we need to be worrying about?
Having enough space for trees and green spaces. As cities develop, we know that there are less trees and green spaces every day. And some cities are working really, really hard to protect their green space through innovative building and bylaws and regulations. So I think making space for trees is really important. As much the space above ground for the canopy as the root system. But we need to be thinking about climate change as well. On the west coast of Canada, we've seen with wildfires, our summers are getting hotter and drier, and those forests, can be under threat for forest fires. So I think we have somebody in the series that will be sharing more information about that. We need to be paying attention to the climate and what we can do locally to adapt to our changing climate.
For kids in these classes today, whether you're joining us live on YouTube, whatever, it's really interesting. And I encourage you, talk to your teachers, talk to your parents about climate change and how things have changed. Because even when I was a boy, Alberta and BC were not on fire every year. That is a fairly recent development. And that's true of Australia. It's true of the United States. Increased fire ferocity and volume and storms in general around the world are something that we're really seeing that are impacting not just forests, but ecosystems of all kinds. So I encourage you to look into that, see how we can play a role and make a difference. And you guys are already doing such a great job of that this generation. So way to go, everybody. All right. Time flies and you're having fun, Meg. I'm going to encourage our classes. Please do check out pltcanada.org. Register for the rest of this series. We've got a lot on the go, including that epic fire program coming up on Wednesday. But before we bring in our class and say thank you and farewell, Mr. Hancock, one last question before we wrap up.
Yeah, I just read once that there's more carbon dioxide than ever on Earth. Isn't that good for trees? Isn't Earth greener than ever?
Ooh, that is one for the scientists. So the extent of how carbon is changing our planet is something really to think about, whether it's the carbon that we produce from our factories or driving cars, or even all the carbon that's unlocked through these forest fires. Whether that's better or not for trees, long-term, what that's going to look like, I'm really not sure what the effect is going to be, because traditionally carbon has never been something that's been in short supply for trees. Contrary to sunlight and water, which can change depending where that tree is, trees never have to really worry about carbon, and things were in balance before, us humans came along and started adding all of these things that unlock and produce carbon. So I think the jury is out on what the effects for trees will be, but your question has led me to further investigation, which is why I love this field so much. And I will end. Big fun, big cone. Got to break out the big pine cone. So this is a coulter pine from California. And it was actually planted in BC. So I did not smuggle this out of the country, but trees are fascinating. I encourage you to get out, touch them, investigate them, look at them, and share your enthusiasm with others.
Very cool. Meg, that is a bonkers pine cone. That's one of my favorite props I've seen in years at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. So thank you for that. I love the in-depth questions, guys. You guys are an amazing audience today. Thank you so much. I hope you'll join us for the rest of the series. And Meg, what we do to wrap up every broadcast, I'm going to bring in Mr. Hancock's class to say thank you and farewell. But folks, if you're on YouTube and you want to scream and yell at home and annoy the principal, you have our permission. Please do. Mr. Hancock, thank you so much for joining in Georgetown. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.